Casual Cinecast, powered by Cinelinx. My name is Chris, and with me as always is Mike. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing pretty great. Thanks for asking, Chris. How are you?
I'm doing well. I like recording at this late night hour.
Yeah, it's the whopping witching hour of 10:54 p.m. where we are.
Which is late night for me.
You're an old man, Chris. Yeah. And by the way, you may have noticed there is no Justin this week. That is because he is taking the month of June off and expects to be back soon. Otherwise, he's a big old wimp, and you have our excuses to track him down and beat him up.
Wow, that's violent.
However, yeah, I know, right? However, to stand in here for him today, we have our fellow film nerd and friend, Peyton Paulette.
Yay!
Yeah. How are you doing today, sir?
Oh, I'm doing great. I'm here, and I'm happy to be with you guys.
Yeah, well, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule. Of course, Peyton also works in the film department at Stephen F. Austin University in Nacogdoches, Texas. And he is kind enough to take the time out of his busy summer shooting schedule to join us for this humble little podcast.
Oh, it's a pleasure to do it. And it's after being on set all day, it's nice to just like unwind and unplug and just talk about movies. It's a lot of fun. So I love being here.
Hey, Peyton, I was wondering something. Did you know that each month we record an episode on the Criterion Collection?
I did know you did that, yeah.
Yeah, so the cool thing about it is that it's voted on by the listeners. So next time we do one, you can vote on it. Last month we did The Stalker, and then coming up we're going to do Weekend by Jean-Luc Godard.
Ooh.
Mm-hmm.
Very nice.
Yeah. Narrowly won out over Pierre Lafaux by Jean-Luc Godard, which would have been my choice.
I agree with that. I remember we talked about that last week. Absolutely would have been
I know,
my
I'm
pick.
still bitter.
This is like Justin's third month in a row, fourth month in a row to win, too. This is getting ridiculous.
I know. But the people have spoken. Who are we to, go against all of them? And you know what? Normally we like to start off every episode talking about, the news for the week called News on the March, which usually consists of anything interesting that we thought, would strike our fancy and be interesting to talk about, or things we have been watching over the last week. After that, we will be reviewing Late Night, starring Emma Thompson and Mindy Kaling. And then don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe to us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at casualcinecast. You can email us about the movies we talk about or anything you want at all. Just movies in general, things you want us to read on the show. If they're interesting, we'll do it. Why not? You can email us at casualcinemedia@gmail.com. And as always, do not forget to leave us an iTunes review, preferably 5 stars, with some constructive criticism, or just praise, whatever you want.
Yeah, leave 5 stars. You can criticize Justin for not being here.
But don't subtract any stars for that. That's not something you should do.
5 stars to Peyton.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes, absolutely.
Look on the positive side. So, with that, gentlemen, are we ready to move into News on the March?
News on the March!
Chris, so this week I've been hearing a little bit about a new show on Amazon Prime called Too Old to Die Young. This is, of course, the new TV show by Nicholas Winding Refn, the director of Drive.
Yes, it is very interesting. You call it a TV show, but it's like almost each episode's an hour and a half long. So,
oh, good Lord. How many episodes are there?
10. So it's about 13 hours of content, I believe. I watched the first 2 episodes, and they almost have nothing to do with each other. It's almost like Kieslowski Colors trilogy, where it's only like tangentially involved with each other. Like there's a character that runs through the first episode that's in the second episode, and that's how they tie in together. And I haven't gone any further past that.
Based on what you've seen so far, is the entire show starring Miles Teller?
Based on what I've seen, the first 2 episodes, the first one is definitely starring Miles Teller, and I'm sure we're going to get to a point where these different characters converge, but in the first 2 episodes, they have not converged yet. And these are really art pieces, it reminds me of a lot of different things. Like Barry Lyndon, have you guys seen Barry Lyndon?
No, that's my biggest shame in my Kubrick filmography. Like, I think I've seen everything except for that.
Okay, yeah. You should check it out. It's good. But there are parts of Barry Lyndon where everybody's posed and looks like a picture. They do a lot of the same thing where like the camera will just pan across these people just kind of standing still. And there's not really a lot going on, but it's just a slow, methodical genre piece almost because, it's noir style. We watched Dragged Across Concrete earlier this year, and that grittiness is in here. But imagine Dragged Across Concrete directed by David Lynch, maybe?
It's much like being dragged across concrete.
Yeah, some people would definitely describe it that way. I think I like it. It's very slow, not necessarily something for everybody. And I could completely understand if somebody doesn't like it. Yeah. But I'm intrigued by the first 2 episodes, and we'll be watching more. It's not something that makes me rush off to binge it. I don't think I'd want to binge this. I watched the first 2 episodes, 2 days in a row.
What you're describing sounds a lot like my thoughts overall of The Neon Demon.
Okay, yeah.
Like, that movie had, like, pretty bad reviews, because I think he had really great reviews with Drive, and everyone was like, this guy's great. And then he came out with, like, Only God Forgives, and everyone was like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah, exactly.
I think Neon Demon was, like, 1 or 2 years after that. And I think critically, that movie was kind of mixed, with the audiences leaning more towards hating it. But I actually thought Neon Demon was pretty cool, but I didn't think that until it was over. Right? Like, I watched the whole thing and I was like, this is excruciating. But then after the last scene was over and like the days and weeks after I had seen Neon Demon and reflecting back upon it, I was like, okay, you know what? Maybe I did like it after all.
They're almost like mood pieces. I think that's what you'd call them because there's not necessarily a lot of plot going on.
Right. He's very much about mood.
Yeah. And there's all the characters are despicable in it, just like in Dragged Across Concrete. I don't think it's a spoiler, and you guys can tell me if it is, but like Miles Teller's character's about 30-something, and he's dating like a 16-year-old girl.
Well, that was a spoiler to me. I didn't know it.
No. Well, then maybe I'll cut it out, but we'll find out. But yeah, so everybody's despicable in it. What I am interested in finding out is Peyton saw this at Cane's, but it was like episode 4 and 5. Is that right?
At Cane's, Chris?
Can,
yeah, like can of soup.
That's what I said. I think Mike misunderstood me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was, he showed up with it, and I didn't know, like, I don't follow the trades that closely. I just knew there was a new reffin' piece of entertainment coming out, and he was going to be there screening it. He brought it out, and I did, I sort of went into it with no preconceptions, and I went into it, and I didn't know that what we saw was like it was a later episode. It was like episode 4 or episode 3 or something like that. So it was completely out of context. So and so there was no introduction to these characters. They were just kind of like standing there, and they would talk and they would stare at each other, and things like that. So I didn't know. I was like, I don't know what's going on. So it was really hard for me to follow and really get into it. I kind of drifted in and out when I was watching it, but yeah, it was beautiful, gorgeous to look at. Miles Teller was really interesting, but yeah, there was just where I thought that Neon Demon, he was kind of getting back to some of his older stuff. This felt like he was like, well, we're just going to go back to Only God Forgives. People stare and just sort of stand. Yeah. But no, it was really hard to follow, and it was like completely hated. I mean, people were walking out in droves when we were watching it.
Well, I mean, if you show people episode 3 or 4 of anything, why would he expect them to like it?
Yeah, it's like, you come in, episode 3, season 6 of Grey's Anatomy. It's like, talking about people we didn't know anything about, and characters would come in and they weren't introduced. So, it was just a little disconnected. And it wasn't until afterwards I was like reading some trades, and they're like, he brought episode whatever it was 3 or 4, and I was like, oh well, I'm sure I'd like it now if I went back and watched the first episode.
I had heard that he edited 4 and 5 together and made it like one piece, or was it split up?
No, it might have been that. I don't remember what he did, but what we saw was I want to say 100 minutes, so maybe it was like an hour and 40 minutes or something like that of stuff. So he might have taken 2 and conglomerated them, mashed them together.
That's crazy.
But he was there, and he did some interviews after the fact. There were some people I knew that were like, I guess, around and helped set up interview setups. He was really defensive, and he kept saying people don't understand what I'm doing.
Awesome. That's always the best way to approach it.
Yeah, I'm smarter than you guys are.
Yeah, you're watching it wrong.
So what I would say is you could watch episode 2, and I've only seen the first 2, but you could watch episode 2 and not have seen episode 1 and be okay. At least in my estimation, I've only seen the first 2. I don't know how it goes past that, but they're so different and only tangentially related that you could definitely do that. So I don't know if it continues that way down the road.
I would imagine not.
Yeah, I imagine they start crossing over more, for sure. And from my understanding, the third episode is almost like its own thing as well, because John Hawkes, which we're going to talk about later, he's also in Deadwood.
Oh,
but
nice.
He shows up in the third one and kind of has his own part in there. So it should be interesting. I want to finish it because it seems interesting to me. And you're right, it is really beautiful.
Were they released all at once?
Uh-huh. All 10 episodes are out now, so you can... I don't know. It also feels a little bit like homework, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. That's why I haven't even thought about diving in yet.
Yeah. It doesn't, what is the word? It doesn't make you want to watch the next episode.
There's no cliffhangers. There's no like anticipation. It's very much like a mood piece is what it sounds like.
I've actually heard it compared quite a bit to Twin Peaks, the TV show, and The Return. Twin Peaks, The Return, whatever that one was called.
I think it was called Twin Peaks, The Return. I think you nailed it.
Perfect.
It is. It's Twin Peaks, but without the humor, I guess.
Oh, that sounds fun. Yeah. All right. Well, that's Too Old to Die Young.
Nice. Okay. So, Peyton, what have you been up to this week?
Mm-hmm.
I know you probably are the busiest of either of us because it is smack dab in the middle of the hottest part of summer. You know what that means? In Nacogdoches, Texas, they need to film a movie outside.
We're spending most of our time outdoors shooting a movie. Yep. So, we teach a class. You did it twice, Mike.
I did. That's probably the most I've ever sweated in my entire life.
You do. You lose 10 pounds pretty easy just on sweat. But we're shooting every year. We shoot a feature length film, and this year we've got a returning alumni. Ricky Kennedy came back after he did his about 5 years ago.
Talented guy,
and he came. He is super talented, super smart. Came back with a script, and we liked it, so we decided to shoot it. It's a Christmas movie, so it's making it a little hard in summertime. But the actors are being really cool.
Oh my god!
With
Did they have to pretend they're cold in sweaters?
No, they made they make jokes about Jesus, Christmas in Texas. What are you gonna do? So they're wearing light sweaters, no jackets or anything like that. It's not like a Milwaukee or something
right.
like that.
Yeah.
But so they're basing it in Texas, but it's working. It's a very sweet little family film. It's very time related. Ricky's first feature was The History of Time Travel, which is also on Amazon Prime.
And it's great, by the way. If anyone wants a really truly indie, awesome sci-fi movie, watch The History of Time Travel. It is really cool, and our friend Ricky made it, and he deserves some attention for that movie because it's very cool.
Absolutely, and I plug it just because if you guys any of the listeners want to watch it, I mean you're supporting an indie filmmaker if you click it and watch it. So I'm a big supporter of that. But and this is a very much a time related movie. So it's instead of like sci-fi, it's more like Christmas magic. The story is about a woman in her early 30s who comes home to her family's home for Christmas to spend the entire week of Christmas. So Christmas Eve all the way to New Year's, and she wakes up Christmas Day and 1 year has gone by. It's the next day, but it's an additional year, and it happens the next day and the next day. So every day is another year. Yeah, and she's seeing her life kind of flash before her eyes and fast forward. So I think a lot of people that can relate to it because it's a story about someone who's feels like they're stuck in a rut and
wasting life.
Literally. That's it. Time is flashing before her, and she's seeing all of her friends like get married and have kids, and get nice jobs, and she's And she's stuck right there in the middle of it. So she kind of just decides, if I only have like 2 or 3 months and I'll be dead if this keeps up. So I got to kind of get my life together and get my life in order. And that's kind of where we meet this character, is her trying to figure out who she is, what decisions she needs to make, and doing all this while she's at home for the holidays. So it's been a lot of fun so far. I'm the director of photography on it.
Sounds like a lot of work for hair and makeup.
It is, and we're having to hop around quite a bit. Now, the wardrobes have been the big thing that's been changing, but besides that, it's just been like, we got to move the Christmas tree. Now we're in this day, so we got to, change the lighting, so not everything looks the same. So this day's sunny, this day's cloudy. So, we just kind of do things like that. But but we're having a blast. The students are all doing well. This is the first day of week 2, and we're going to go all the way till July. I think we're going to try to wrap up July 3rd, and then we'll be moving on.
Nice. So. That's really awesome. So let me ask you guys this. I mean, I already know the answer to a lot of these questions because I was there for some of this. Not the current stuff, but, how long do your days usually run?
We try to go to 12 hours, and we've hit that about every day. It depends also on just like how good the crew is. So if we've got a lot of students from last year that are on the crew, we usually go like a lot faster. Like last year we shot Buddy Cattell, one of your favorite listeners.
Oh yeah, Buddy. Shout out to Buddy.
Buddy shot his movie last year, and we got done 8-hour days, 9-hour days, because we had a really seasoned crew that knew what they were doing. These are all almost entirely just green. Like they never, a lot of them are just intro level. So basically you're saying
it's going really slowly and badly.
Yeah, well, it's not going badly, but it's going very slow.
You're making a terrible movie, is what you're saying.
Yeah. No, it's looking
No,
great.
I'm sure that's not true.
It's just painful watching them trying to wrangle a C-stand. I'm just like,
to be fair, C-stands are a pain in the ass.
Yes, they are.
So just for the record, what is a C-stand?
Yeah, so basically they are, Peyton, you say. Yeah, you're the teacher.
It's a combination stand and, I don't know. It's hard to describe unless you see it, but if you Google C-stand, you can see what it looks like.
It's like a thing that can do anything, really. Like you can...
It literally can, yeah.
By the way, are there any other... I know Justin's movie, Camino, which he advertises on here a lot, was made on the SFA Summer Feature list of movies. Are there any other movies that you can see on Amazon or anything like that are made from SFA?
Yes. The Herbert Midgley's feature film, The Rise of the Robots, is also on Amazon Prime.
That sounds like Attack of the Clones, or such a pulpy title.
It is, and it's that's if you're a fan of trashy B movies, that's what he was trying to emulate. Things like Space Monster and Galaxy Invaders, just really tongue in cheek, super campy, kind of super low budget, really embracing the fact that he didn't have any money, anything like that. But it's a fun little sci-fi movie. It's 75 minutes, and so it's certainly worth a watch if you just want to. Just don't go in thinking it's going to be Citizen Kane, because it is not that. But it's just a good time.
Citizen Kane with robots, maybe.
It is. Yeah, it's that's a good way. It's the Citizen Kane of robot movies. Yeah.
Okay, so there you go. I thought our listeners might like a little bit of info about Stephen F. Austin University in Nacogdoches, Texas. If you are an aspiring filmmaker, if you are at all interested in doing this kind of thing or finding out what it's like to make a movie, but you still want a bachelor's degree or something, or a master's degree, look that school up. They do lots of cool stuff.
Mm-hmm. Please do.
All right. And with that, guys, the main thing that I have been doing over the past week and a half has basically been watching Deadwood.
That makes me so happy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a great show.
Finally. I've always heard about the show, and I'm finally watching it. So now that the Deadwood movie has been released and it has been well received, I am finally deciding to dive into the beloved TV show. This, of course, is the show from HBO that was canceled back in, 2006?
Oh, God, has it been that long? Yeah, I guess it was.
Anyways, I've always heard wonderful things, even back when I worked at Blockbuster, my very first Blockbuster job back in 2007. I'd always heard to watch it, but I never did because I'd always heard it just ended. It was just canceled out of nowhere. And to me, there's nothing worse than like the betrayal you feel whenever you invest hours into something and it either does one of two things. It either does not give you closure from being canceled, or even worse, it goes on 1 to 2 to 4 seasons too long and ruins its own legacy. I mean, because of that, I always wrote the show off until finally the movie was happening. And even whenever I heard the movie was announced, I thought, I'm going to wait and see how it is. I'm going to wait and see if it turns out to be good. Because how often do reboots actually, turn out to be good after they've waited years and years and years? And then it came out and it was well received, so I thought, let's go for it. And I just started season 3 last night. I've only got like 11 episodes left and then the movie. But I'm very much enjoying this show.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
great.
It is so good. And I mean, when it came out, It was always so well reviewed, right? And everyone seemed to mostly agree you need to watch it, even if it does end without closure, But even then, I still couldn't bring myself to do it. But now that the movie's out there, and I know I have nothing but goodness to look forward to, I'm just enjoying every step of the way,
Well, good.
Another thing I'm liking a whole lot is, I've always been pretty familiar with Ian McShane. He's always been in my line of sight, my periphery, or whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. Because he's famous and he's, in so much stuff. But this is my first time seeing him in this part as Al Swearington.
Yeah.
It's the part that he was born to play.
I was about to say just that. I was like, there's nothing like seeing an actor in the role that they break onto the scene with for the first time. There's something magic about it. Like, I'm sure Ian McShane was around for years before Deadwood, but this is the first time I'd ever heard of him, and that most people, I think, had ever heard of him, right? I think that's fair to say.
He was in the Battle of Britain, like a really old film. He's been around for a long time.
He has been around for a long time. I don't want to undersell him, right? But I think this is the role that he is famous for. And I think there's just something magic about whenever that right actor fits the right part,
Agreed.
And the dialogue just comes alive, and they cease to be a written character, and they are just their own entity. I am familiar with Ian McShane, yet somehow he is not Ian McShane when he watches this, or whenever I watch this show. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. George Clooney is always George Clooney in every movie. I've never seen George Clooney transcend to anything beyond George Clooney. Ian McShane in this part is just something special.
No, I agree. He's like, it's kind of like Bryan Cranston. I mean, he vanished and, Walter White appeared. So I completely agree.
Exactly. That's the perfect point. Like,
and I just remember the first time I watched it, how you just get transfixed in the language. Mm-hmm. I mean, because I've never heard ever, just like the amount of cursing and how eloquent and beautiful it is, and it's amazing.
I kind of like to think of Ian McShane, the way he speaks, the dialogue in the show, the David Milch dialogue. I compare it to Samuel Jackson speaking Quentin Tarantino dialogue.
That's a good one. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, not every actor can nail it in this show, right? Like, I've noticed, like, some actors, like, I'm like, they're really selling, like, the cocksuckers and the fuckers and the fuckins and like, the really forced swearing, Mm-hmm. And some actors take to it really naturally, like the Ian McShanes and the Timothy Oliphants, and the Brad Dourifs. But then there are some of the side actors that really took a few episodes to grow on me. And now I pretty much love everybody. Yeah. I think there are some performers that are stronger than others. And then some performers that just kind of rely on their presence. And I'm talking to Powers Booth here.
Yeah.
Like, he's not as good at, like, the flowery language, but he's really good at being intense,
I can't speak to how much I like the show. And I watched it before the movie came out. I rewatched the whole series. The overwhelming sense of nostalgia and like recognition when like Calamity Jane comes back on. I'm like, oh yeah, Calamity Jane. Or, Brad Dourif shows up and I'm like, it was like old friends showing back up. Yeah, Doc Cochran. And it was just really awesome to be able to revisit this world and meet those characters again. It was a lot of fun.
Another show, though, speaking of like the flowery language of Deadwood, another show that I'm always trying to sell people on, and it's a show that I tried to sell you on, Chris, and I think you watched some of it. It's called Black Sails on Stars.
Yeah, I've got one more season to get through on that, and then I'll finish it up for you.
Well, do, please, because the ending to that show is really fun to talk about, and I don't have many people I can talk about it with. That show is a show that I think takes a couple episodes to find its legs, but once it does, I think it really gets going. And it has really like drawn out monologues and speeches and elaborate language that it uses. And it's not realistic, kind of like Deadwood. There's not as many cocksuckers and F words and other things as Deadwood. It's not as vulgar as Deadwood, but it's very much like a literary show, you know? Like it's very like the long-winded speeches and symbolism and things like that, especially in seasons 3 and 4. I really wish more people would watch that show, and it comes on Stars.
Mm-hmm.
So I watched the first episode of Euphoria just mere minutes before we recorded this episode.
So you're still reeling from it,
I'm still recovering right now. I wanted to see what all the buzz was about. You know, it's the next edgy show, or is it just shock value? So, Chris, did you watch this as well?
Yeah, I watched it yesterday.
Peyton, no chance yet?
I don't even know if I've ever heard of it.
The show opens up, and she's born 3 days after 9/11. I don't think I've had a show make me feel this old before.
Oh, wow, yeah.
But she's born 3 days after 9/11, so her entire existence was after 9/11, which is interesting to me.
Turns out, in my opinion, based on the first episode alone, I do not think this show is good at all. It seems pretty shallow, but then again, this is also coming from a guy who has seen a lot of movies, and so maybe it isn't as easy to shock me as it should be. You know, or as it might be to a lot of people. This show seems to kind of depend on shock, at least in my opinion. It doesn't seem to have much substance beyond that. I would be interested to see what Chris thinks real quick, though.
There's an extended party sequence in this show, and it takes up most of the majority of the episode. And it feels like it's just this concentrated, everything that teens can do is happening at this party, you know?
Yeah. Okay.
And so it's very concentrated on all these crazy things that are happening at this one party. I will be interested, like Mike was saying, I want to give it another episode or two, because let's see where we move on past this. You know, like, what is the fallout of this party episode? You know, and let's see if it finds its footing past this, because there is a lot of stuff going on in here, and it's a lot of bad stuff. I mean, not
on the nose stuff is my complaint.
Yeah, there is a lot of stuff in there that I did find interesting. I like, for instance, like as I was growing up, this is my old man talk, but when I was growing up, we didn't have access through phones to pornography like so many kids do today. You know, there's an interesting sequence. So kids, virgins, are learning from porn how they think they should have sex, and I find that interesting.
Yeah, I know what you mean. That scene was actually one of the more interesting scenes in the episode, but even then, it was a little much. Like the narration, like the whole show is kind of narrated by Zendaya, who plays MJ in the new Spider-Man movies, and I guess she was on Disney for a while. So this is like her I'm a grown-up show, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
But man, her narration is real bad, in my opinion. Like, I think the very first scene of the very first episode, she's complaining about how the first time she ever lost in life, or the first time she remembers like being a loser in life, was being born. She's like, I was perfectly fine and happy and everything was great. And then all of a sudden my mother's uterus started to crush me. And then I lost for the very first time ever. And then it showed her being born or whatever. And it was like, Lord. And like,
okay.
If you think that sounds cool, you're going to like the show, I think. But if you think that sounds stupid, then this show's going to be like pulling teeth, which is what the first episode felt like to me.
I do think there's a segment of maybe younger people than us that will watch this show and be able to identify with it more closely than we do.
Yeah, but I mean, I think I chose that little segment because I think that's something that no matter what age you are, that's pretty lame, right? Like complaining about being, like, I don't know, like I get it. Like you're trying to put across that, you know, you're depressed. People have been trying to do that since like Prozac in like the 90s and the 80s and things like that. Like they've always been trying to convey like this generation's lost and doesn't care, like in every new iteration. But it seems like this could have been done in like 1994. You know what I mean? Like it seems like, what's the guy who did the Doom generation?
Oh man, those are the worst.
Yeah, it seems like that. It seems like a Greg Iraqi movie.
It's better than that, I think.
I mean, based on the first episode, I don't think it's better yet.
Yet, okay. I still think it's better than like the Doom generation and those guys, but I'm interested to see where it goes and see how if it doesn't
right.
level
I mean,
out.
it just seems like one of those like let's be edgy, like a short bus, or what's another one of those like edgy. It's just like edgy without substance. So far,
American Honey. That was
I haven't
one.
seen American Honey. Actually, I'm more interested in that one, but that's interesting. Does that movie have a lot of like sexual content in it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I've actually heard good things about American Honey. I haven't seen it though. You don't like it, Peyton?
It was a little pretentious, and I think it was like it was like 2.5 hours long.
The runtime
like
seems
stuff
pretty
like
pretentious.
I mean, how much honey do you need?
Exactly. How much is too much? Yeah. And if you guys think we are wrong, especially me, because I know I was harsher on it than Chris was, write us in. Let us know.
For sure, especially if you're of that generation that we are not.
If you're younger and we're just old men who are missing the boat, write in. Let us know.
We'll probably tell you to get off our lawn.
Yeah, we'll shake our fist at you. Get out of here. Okay. Cool. And is that it for What's on Our Minds?
I've spread my dreams under your feet. Tread softly because you tread on my dreams. What?
I'm in a single-income household, and Jen and I just had our second baby. I think it's time for a raise.
I can't give you a raise, Gabe. It's like giving a raise to a drug addict.
My child's like a drug problem.
You're fired. You're fired, obviously. Oh, you must be McCreary. Oh, wow. You're fired.
She's coming back! She's coming back. She's coming back! Push me.
Who are you?
I'm Molly. I'm a new writer.
You want to sit down?
Okay.
That's where Mendelsohn sits.
Could you sit down, please?
Oh, I'll just use this trash can. There's hardly any trash in it at all. Oh, it's kind of comfortable. Better than a chair.
That's our show, everyone. I came to tell you this year is your last.
What?
They can't replace you if everyone loves you.
Do none of you understand what is at stake here? I am being replaced. Think about why the show is bad and come up with ways to fix it.
I wish I was a woman of color so I could just get any job I want.
We talked about this. You can't say that.
I know what everyone thinks of me, but just because I was lucky enough to get this job doesn't mean I'm stupid enough to lose it.
What exactly is wrong with my bits?
You're a little old and a little white.
What can I do about that?
I have some jokes for the monologue. I shouldn't do this in an English accent, should I?
No.
Watch me! This is your show. It's an expression of who you are.
How would you describe Molly?
She said I was a vibrant splash of color on the gray canvas of our writing staff. I mean, whoosh.
I need you, Molly. I need your pushiness and lack of boundaries.
You love me.
No, I didn't say that. No.
I mean, not in those words, but you...
No, I didn't say it in any of those words.
Watch me do. Watch me.
All right, guys, so we're going to get into our feature discussion of Late Night. Just to let you know, we are going to have a non-spoiler discussion followed by a spoiler discussion. So just be prepared. We'll let you know when the spoilers are going to start.
Yeah, there'll be a nice, sizable, healthy bumper there that you cannot miss. Nicely done, Peyton. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Late
no problem.
Night was directed by Nisha Ganatra, starring Mindy Kaling, Emma Thompson, and John Lithgow. The IMDb synopsis says, a late-night talk show host suspects that she may soon lose her long-running show. Great synopsis. Very to the point. I like it.
And it doesn't tell you too much.
Yeah,
Perfect
good.
synopsis, one might say.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, so, guys, Late Night, I think we all chose this because we were up in the air on what to review this week. This was the most widely released movie that had the best reviews, so I think it was a pretty easy decision. And also, one of our listeners, Matt Ward, requested that we do it. And so, hey, who are we to let someone down?
Not us.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you, Peyton. Okay, so who wants to get us started on what they thought, or what their expectations were, I guess, first and foremost, about Late Night, and then what they thought?
I had an interesting viewing experience with this because I had not seen the trailer. The only thing I had ever seen was the poster. And I knew who was in it and the cast and stuff, and I knew the basic synopsis. So I went in with zero expectations. I didn't know what to expect. I knew it was a comedy. These two people I knew Mindy Kaling had written it.
Same.
That was it.
Yeah,
and
that's actually more than I knew.
And she had yeah, well, and she had written like probably my favorite episode of The Office, and so I was like, oh, I was
Which
all
episode of
ready
The Office
for it,
did she
and
write?
She wrote the episode where Michael Scott burns his foot while making bacon in the morning.
That is a good episode.
That's a solid episode.
That like encapsulates Michael Scott's character as a whole in the whole show.
It perfectly, yes. So I mean, so I was like, she's a great comedy writer, so she'll be this should be a great time. I went with a friend of mine. And she hadn't, didn't really know anything about the movie either. And, she knows nothing about movies. She just watches movies. So it was really interesting having someone else there to watch the movie with. And so the movie starts. It starts out okay. And I think I might have hated it. I didn't really like it that much. And she was a good bumper too, because I'm sitting there and we're about 20 minutes in the movie and her phone comes out. So I mean, she was completely bored. It was a semi-full.
Wait. She got her phone out during the movie?
She did. She was just like she was just scrolling on some stuff.
Yikes.
She was just completely just kind of bored to death. And I was in a semi-full theater. There's probably 30 of us there. Nobody laughed. It was silent screening. So I thought that a lot of the jokes fell flat. I'll give, I guess, a little bit of a better synopsis. There's Emma Thompson is a late night show host. Her ratings are kind of in the tank and she needs something to kind of get the show going again. And they're like, you need to hire new writers or get better writers. And they bring in Mindy Kaling, who was basically like, it's this roundabout way that she got hired there, but she was more or less a diversity hire. But she is supposed to help them, and she comes from the outside, so she's got an outsider's viewpoint, loves the show, and they start making the show better. But the best stuff in the movie was the stuff in the writer's room. I felt that stuff landed for me.
Yeah.
That was kind of funny, and it had a lot of energy, and that was the stuff I was most interested in. Everything involving Emma Thompson's character I didn't care about. Like, I think they were trying to do the Devil Wears Prada sort of like bitchy boss thing, and it just didn't work. And Mindy Kaling came across as really just, her jokes kind of fell flat. Everything kind of just fell flat in that stuff. But, anytime that there was a lot of people and there was a lot of, going back and forth in the writer's room stuff, that was great. But, I just didn't like it very much. And, it was funny, we talked about, Dark Phoenix. It didn't feel like, who was supposed to be the main character. I was kind of confused halfway through. Is it supposed to be Mindy Kaling because she's got some stuff that she has to overcome? But then Emma Thompson's basically the main character too, but we didn't really get much of her stuff in there. So it was just kind of it just didn't, I don't know, it was just bad direction or what, because I'm sitting there and I'm listening to the movie, I'm watching the jokes, and I'm kind of envisioning having a script in my hand and reading it. I'm like, I would have made this would have read funny. It just wasn't hitting, I just don't know what it was.
That's interesting. Yeah. That is almost exactly my experience. I laughed a few times during the first act when I had some goodwill towards the movie still, And I think if the movie hadn't squandered all that goodwill in Act 2, I probably would have laughed, a few more times later on. There are some things that Mindy Kaling does that I think are very funny and charming, as well as Emma Thompson. But I feel like a lot of this seems very heavy-handed in places, and its themes become less graceful as with balancing a lot of ideas at once. Like we're trying to balance a woman in a man's world, tackle white privilege, we're trying to tackle nepotism, we're trying to tackle diversity hires, and we're trying to tackle, like the double standard of that women have to face in long-term relationships that men also have to face in long-term relationships. There's a lot that this movie is like trying to put on itself.
Yeah.
And I feel like maybe trimming some of that down to a few ideas that you can do really well would have made a stronger movie.
Kind of typically the sign of a first-time script, right?
Yeah, it's like, I mean, I don't want to come across like I disagree with any of the points that this movie is making. You know what I mean? I agree with a lot of the points this movie is making, if not all of them.
Just that there's too many.
However, it's just like there are some of the ways that it tries to go about showing this perfect PC liberal utopia that also isn't very realistic and doesn't ring true to like real life and just seems like a fantasy land,
It does. And a lot of those jokes that were making fun of certain things, like, you know, Me Too is brought up and all that stuff, it just was almost cringy. Like, it wasn't funny. It was like, ooh.
Yeah.
I wouldn't go there, you know?
I feel like the movie is trying to be very clever. And I think its flaw is that it gives you the impression at the beginning of the movie that it can rise up to that cleverness level and that you will be impressed the whole time. Like, there is a scene, I think, pretty early on in Act 1 or 2 where Mindy Kaling is like, this is what is funny and this is what works about your show. And then I was getting ready for that movie. I was getting ready for them to train to become that movie and that show. And then later they kind of subvert that and go off into like different areas and never become the show that I thought they were going to become.
Yes.
And so, anyways, that's where I kind of come down on it. Chris, what did you think?
I don't come down on it as... I certainly don't hate this movie. I don't think it's that great. I think it's charming. I thought Mindy Kaling and Emma Thompson's characters did work well together. There's a love interest in this movie that I don't think works very well, or there's characters that are on the side that come and go without a lot of reason, if that makes sense.
Well, they are archetypes and they are like stand-ins for like white privilege. Various types of white privilege.
Yeah, and they're not necessarily fleshed out that well, or the character
because they're
isn't.
just that. They are metaphors for white privilege. That's why they're not characters.
Right. And I wish that there was more, is what I'm trying to say. That is, thank you, Mike. Peyton, you said something that kind of rung a bell for me, and you were talking about how you weren't sure who was the main character. One of the things that I was struck by this film is that this film is essentially on the bones of a romantic comedy. I really saw this as a romantic comedy between Emma Thompson and Mindy Kaling, and in that way, neither one of them, you know, are like, they're both the main character. Does that make sense? Or the antagonist and the protagonist, or however that works.
No, yeah, I'm with you on that.
It's not a typical romantic comedy, but I definitely saw it as more of a romantic comedy than anything else per se. I enjoyed it. I thought it was charming, but like I said, there's definitely problems with it, and it's certainly not deserved of the hype that came out of Sundance with this film. But I had a good time at the theater. I enjoyed it. So
yeah, I mean, to jump off that, I mean, the performances from both of the leads are here. At least from the main two. I think the writing and the dialogue and the conveniences of script all seem a little too much by the end to really land for me. And I don't hate the movie either. I don't think it's good, though. And I wouldn't recommend it. I think it becomes more of a message movie without any charm, like a PC wet dream of a Hallmark movie. And like I said earlier, that's coming from a guy who mostly agrees with what they're saying. There are some really good things to explore here. I just wish that it maybe hadn't put so much on its plate and would have taken its time a little bit more. I did find myself a little bored by the end of it, but all of that said, I've sounded pretty negative so far. I think all the performances across the board are pretty charming. I think Mindy Kaling is great. I think Emma Thompson, even though I think most of her scenes fall flat, I don't think it's her fault at all. There's even some moments where she made me laugh throughout the movie. I think Hugh Dancy is really good.
For what he's given, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, for what he's given. I mean, he's charming, he's really slimy, and you like to not like him, you know. All of that's good. I think that works. But yeah, I think maybe a little bit more of an inspired director could have even made this exact same script come alive.
You know, I was looking at the director and the director's back catalog, and she has done a lot of TV and like sitcoms, and I think that kind of comes across here. I think she can do more, and she has a future, but I think ultimately here, with what she has done, it kind of shows through here.
No, I thought the same thing. I had not, at when the end credits started, I saw that director and I was like, oh, let me look her up. And I thought it was the exact same thing. I was like, oh, she did a lot of TV and sitcoms. It feels like that, she shot it like that. So I'm with you on that.
Yeah, I have something to hop off on that sitcom idea here in a minute when we get to spoilers, which I'm ready for whenever you guys are.
I don't know. You're right. Something is missing here, but I did not begrudge my time in the theater with this movie.
No, I mean, it wasn't excruciating. Even when I didn't enjoy it, it wasn't like pulling teeth. So ultimately, I think the reason I feel so harsh on it is probably because it's almost great. Well, not almost great. It's not anywhere close to great, but it's almost...
It's got great ideas.
Yeah, it's got good ideas. There's a lot of things I like. Let's put it that way.
No, I guess Rosebud is just a piece in a jigsaw puzzle.
Give me one of the cigarettes you got up there. I'll tell you all about it.
Things are going to start happening to me now.
And here we go.
Okay, so we find out pretty early on in the movie that Hugh Dancy's character is a little bit of a womanizer and has had an affair in the past with Emma Thompson's character. And that's a little juicy because the whole movie we're waiting for that shoe to drop because John Lithgow is her husband who is in the early stages of Parkinson's or some stages of Parkinson's, right? And so we're like, oh man, how is this information going to be unveiled and what will it mean, you know? It turns out it's the exact same thing that bothers me about so many movies or TV shows where you have a main character that's cheating and you're excited to see the other shoe drop, but then they have to add a qualifier to where it makes the person who's the victim not so bad. And that is the part where he's like, look, I know you cheated on me when I was sick and had Parkinson's, but I know a long time ago I left my wife and kids for you, and I knew there'd be some kind of comeuppance one day, and here it is, you know? And that way, as soon as you hear that, you're like, oh, okay, they're even, kind of. You know, like there's like this sense of like, oh, she's not such a terrible person. Well, that to me is so cheap that it lets your character off the hook. It lets you off the hook of doing any complicated writing. It lets you off the hook for doing any kind of satisfying like resolution to such a thing. Like, that's an interesting story that I was waiting to unfold the whole movie. What is the Parkinson's victim whose life is essentially over? How do they handle their spouse cheating on them at the most terrible time in their entire life, you know? Oh, turns out he was a guy who left his wife and child initially, so no matter what she does to him, she's not that bad. That to me is a trope that I think is very cheap and annoying, and it's been happening more and more in things that I've noticed lately. And I was wondering if you guys have noticed this trope, what you guys thought about it, if it registered to you at all, or if I'm just being completely too harsh on it.
No, I fall, yes. I don't know that I've necessarily noticed that trope popping up a lot, but that does bother me when it's just sort of like this, you know, we feel like this character's life is falling apart because it kind of is because of things that they did, and then, you know, it's just like, oh, it's okay, and then we just kind of move past it. Like it was kind of you know, and we're in spoilers now, but you know, it's never really intimated actually how the information kind of got out, but it was like his email, Hugh Dancy's email got hacked, and we saw all these juicy emails.
The manager of that comedian dude that she insulted on TV, who was supposed to take over her show, I think it was implied that he made it leak. Yeah.
Yes, so he made this big leak and it became like tabloid fodder and on the front page of every newspaper, and then we just really just like the audience, I guess, just really quickly forgot and forgave and moved on, and I was like, well, that's okay, that's not typically how that works, you know, so that bothered me.
Right, and well, they almost made a point of it, right? They were I was like, I almost forgave it because they were trying to like make a point of like the double standard for men versus women in that exact same situation. And Emma Thompson's character was like, no, it's despicable either case, you know? And she was really adamant about that for a second. And then Mindy Kalings' character was like, no, we can spin this and make a point out of it. And then they didn't.
Yeah, who this did remind me of, like the Emma Thompson character, I thought was modeled off of Craig Ferguson. Because if you remember, you know, he was, I think, Scottish or something, and you know, and he was late night show host before Seth Meyers, and you know, one of his criticisms that he kept like trying to fight was low ratings because he refused to have the trash. Like YouTube stars and stuff like that. He would have like Desmond Tutu and authors and, you know, Nobel Prize winners. Those were the people he was interested in talking to, so his ratings were low. But he had a small group of really dedicated followers. So I thought that was maybe the basis for Emma Thompson's
character. They would have
explored
explored her followers a little bit more in the movie. Like, who is her audience?
Yeah, exactly. And there was like little bits like, Mindy Kaling was watching some old stand-up of Emma Thompson's that she was on YouTube. She's like, I watch this all the time. I'm like, whoa, that's cool. I would have liked to have seen what was she like, when she was younger. I mean, we only saw that for a brief moment. I thought that was really interesting. Going back to, what you said earlier, Chris, and it just made me think of it, which is, these are like a romantic comedy, and I was expecting that. But then it didn't really follow through because, and you even said it, Mike, which was they're like, Mindy Kaling's like, no, this is the type of show we need to make. And I was like, okay, now the romance is starting. Right. So they're going to work together. They're really going to work together, and they're going to make this show a new thing, and it's going to go off on the charts, and things are going to be great. And then their romance is going to get shaky because maybe she gets an offer from somebody else to go write for them. Right. I thought so. I was expecting a real romance there, but they felt so separate, and we never saw them work together really, other than just a few brief moments. But it seemed like, I thought she was going to get fired and go back to work for like the chemical plant, and that never happened. So there was just, that was frustrating to me. So it felt like there were so many good ideas. The synopsis was so strong, but it just was just a conglomeration of so many ideas that just sort of got lost. So
yeah, I agree. And one thing that kind of felt weird in the movie to me is it feels like their relationship never got to a point where they were actually friends. Like, it just felt shaky the whole time, right? And Emma Thompson's character felt kind of like moody and unpredictable, and never felt like she turned a real corner to me. It just felt like she was confusing and like contradictory, like up until the end. Case in point would be, I believe Mindy Kaling's character gets fired twice and then rehired twice. Like, I feel like it happens early in the movie, and then like it happens as like the Act 2, Act 3 bridge. Mm-hmm. Right. But so like, I feel like that step's a little redundant. Like, and it also is confusing to the trajectory of the characters. Like, if she's constantly getting fired and getting rehired because she's good, it leads me to believe that Mindy Kaling was always good, and that Emma Thompson's character was like terrible, right? Not a good boss, never learned anything.
My feeling about the Emma Thompson character is not necessarily that she needs to befriend Mindy Kaling's character. She needs to take the advice of Mindy Kaling and open up to both the people around her and to her audience in order to become more successful, because she's so closed off to the people around her and to the audience that nobody has access to her. And so that's when she opens up at the very end about her affair and is honest with the audience and allows people into her. That's when she becomes
But see, it was more of a roller coaster before that, though. It was like, the movie starts out, like, it seemed like she was selling out and doing the things she didn't want to do, and then she got famous. I don't know. It just seemed like a mess of, like, what we're supposed to think about her, what the public thinks about her, etc.
I kept, comparing it to Devil Wears Prada because it does this concept so well, and so that's... Maybe you can say it's unfair, but it's fair because they're kind of in the same wheelhouse. So I kept comparing to that when I was watching it, and I was like, just seeing all the points where that movie hit the tone right, and the jokes and everything, and also what we're supposed to feel about Anne Hathaway's character and what we're supposed to feel about
Meryl Streep.
Meryl Streep. Yeah, what are we supposed to feel about Meryl Streep's character? So yeah, it's just I'll just leave it there. I didn't like it at all. So
fair.
I thought this was okay. Justin or Mike thought it was a little bit less good, and then Peyton hated it. I still think it was a better choice than Men in Black.
Agreed.
Definitely.
Agreed.
I would rather watch this movie a million times over and support the little guy, support movies that are trying to put ideas into movies, trying to put ideas into comedies, telling stories for people who don't usually get stories told about them. I'm in favor of everything. Like, if this movie on paper is all great,
yeah,
like, I want to love this movie. I'm surprised 30 minutes into it when I started to turn against it, because even the first act, I thought it had me.
I have to say, I wholeheartedly agree with you, Mike. I would support this movie and original ideas, lower budget, mid-budget films than a big tentpole piece of crap. So yeah, if nothing else, go see it for that you're supporting original content, not just series and sequels and all that stuff.
I noticed this was put out by Amazon Prime.
I did too. I was surprised to see that.
A wide release based on Amazon Prime, and I was the only one in the theater. So you know what? See the movie, please. Don't let Disney own everything. Don't let everything become movies that have to make $100 million on their opening weekend.
Amazon actually recently released that they were going to start doing the Netflix style, where they release it in like theaters for 2 weeks and then release it onto Amazon. So go see this so that monetary reason to release it in the theaters, please.
I don't know if this certainly isn't a spoiler, but it was just an interesting story. In my theater that I went to go see in Lufkin, Texas, because that's where it was playing, it was accompanied by Spanish subtitles.
How distracting. Okay. Thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you, Jake Wagner Russell, for our intro and outro music. He was also, by the way, a groomsman with me this last weekend at our friend Brian Wild's wedding, along with Justin, who is normally a host on this podcast, but, busy guy. So, shout out to both of those guys. You can find more of Jake's music at www.soundcloud.com/bobscotch. Stay tuned to this channel. Our next episode is going to be Toy Story 4.
Finally out of this kind of drudgery of the summer, and we can now, hopefully, this is a good movie.
Yeah, you wouldn't think the summer would be such a dull slug for movies, but man, it has been kind of like a pain to get through.
It has been.
But yeah, Toy Story 4, and then obviously next month there will be another Casually Criterion episode on Jean-Luc Godard's Weekend.
Sounds great.
Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe, and review us on iTunes, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can find us at @CasualCinecast, and also on iTunes at Casual Cinecast as well.
Thanks so much for listening, guys, and we'll see you next time.
Talk to you later.
Say bye, Peyton.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know if it was weird if I did it too, but okay.
I was just joking. All right. I think we're good.
Bye, guys. We'll see you next time. All right.
Awesome. Nailed it.
Keeping it exactly like that. All right. Stopping.